Have you ever ordered a new reed in the mail and been so excited for it to finally arrive, and when it finally gets here and you put it on your bassoon to play and it sounds like this? Unfortunately, this is a common issue with new bassoon reeds, but fortunately for you, this video is going to show you some tips and tricks on how to properly break in a bassoon reed to get it sounding good and feeling good to play. The best part of today's video is that everything I'm going to share with you, you can do with little to no tools or reed making experience. The first thing that you need to do to set yourself up for success is to make sure that you're always buying reeds made by professional bassoonists. While I totally want you to go out and support your local music stores, the reeds at these retailers are often mass-produced and not made with as much care as ones that are made individually by professional bassoonists. Even if you are buying reeds from a high-quality bassoonist, they may not work for you when you first get them in the mail. In fact, most of the time they will not work right out of the box. It's important to remember that reeds are made with cane, which is a bamboo-like wood. It's an organic piece of material that is really sensitive to changes in its environment. You might notice, for example, one day that it's really cold and rainy out and your reed feels and plays a certain way, and the next day the temperature may rise drastically and it may be really hot and dry out and your reed feels completely different. That's because the reed is responding to the elements around it. This idea is absolutely true for brand new reeds. You can imagine that the reed making process, where we're soaking the cane, we're folding it in half, we're cutting off the tip, adding wires and thread and forming it into a completely new shape than when it started, is a really traumatic process for the reed to go through. So when you first receive a reed in the mail, it has just gone through all of these traumatic processes of reed making and it hasn't had a chance to settle into its final form. So it's going to be really brittle and stiff, it's going to be difficult to play, and you're going to have to spend time breaking the reed in, and it may even need some additional adjustments as you're breaking it in. Throughout this video, I'm going to show you my process for breaking in a brand new reed and also the adjustments that I usually have to make after the reed is made. I've added video chapter markers down in the description so you can skip around to what you need. So let's say you just got a new reed and you want to start breaking it in. The first thing that I do with a brand new reed is I soak it completely in a cup of water for about 10 minutes or so because, like I mentioned before, the cane is really brittle and dry and it just needs a chance to soak up a lot of moisture. Remember that every time before you use a reed, you need to soak it completely in water, the thread and everything, so that it's ready to play. So once my reed has been completely soaked, I do what I like to call kneading the reed, similar to kneading bread, where I'm just pinching along the sides of the reed, or what's called the rails of the reed. It will take time to learn how hard you need to pinch the sides, but start out gently and then gradually add more pressure until it feels like you're making a difference when you're pressing down the reed. What this does is it encourages the sides of the reeds to come together more so that they'll be less resistant to play. We're going to talk about the tip of the reed in more detail later in this video, but essentially what we're looking for is for the sides, when you're looking at the very opening of the reed and you pinch it from top to bottom, you want the sides of the reeds to close first and then you want the center of the tip to close last, sort of like this football shape. That's what the kneading part of a new reed, it encourages that sort of shape and gets the tip in a position where it's going to be easier to play. If the tip opening is super wide and more of an oval shape, that means your lips are going to have to put more pressure on the reed in order to get the blades to vibrate, and it's going to be more difficult to play. Finally, after I've soaked my reed for about 10 minutes and I've spent a few minutes kneading the sides of it, I will start to play it on the bassoon. When I test the reed on the bassoon, I don't play my full range just yet because I know that the low register and the high register are not going to sound good on that new reed. And so I'm really just testing it in the middle, comfortable register in the middle of the staff just to start. The first thing that I play is just some basic scale exercises, just staying in that middle sort of 1 octave range in the staff until the reed starts to break in a little bit and feel a little bit more comfortable to play. This might take anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes to close to an hour depending on the reed. One of my favorite scale exercises is called fluency scales, where you're just going back and forth on the scale exercises right in the middle of the register of the reed, and that really adds playtime to the reed right where we need it. You also can't expect a reed to play a super soft dynamic just yet, because again, it's still pretty brittle and it needs to break in more to be able to play soft. So really remember that you've got to stay in that sort of middle register and then probably a comfortable mezzo forte dynamic for most of the time. You can't expect your reed to be doing much more beyond that until you've really started to break it in. The idea is just to get some playtime on the reed. It's gonna feel pretty yucky to play for a while, that's completely normal, but you just gotta get that playtime in, those first probably couple hours or more on the reed, and then it will start to feel more comfortable and you can start to branch out and do more things. I do those scale exercises, the fluency scales and some other things for about 30 minutes on the first day that I'm trying out the reed, and then I put the reed away. You may feel tempted to keep playing the reed after that 30 minutes, but the truth is that the reed needs time to settle in. The slower and more methodically that you can break in the reed, the longer it's going to last, because you're giving it the time to adjust to its changes. So on the second day, I follow the same steps that I did on the previous day with the reed. I soak it for a while, I spend some time kneading it, and I play some scale exercises. And at this point, I might start to venture into the low end of the bassoon or the high end and just see how it's feeling. But for the most part, I'm still trying to just get some playtime on the reed. On the second day, I might play it for an hour or so and see how it feels, and then I'll put it away for the day. I would follow this process for a couple days, and then maybe on the third or fourth day, you can try using that new reed for a practice session and see how it feels. But it may not be ready yet. If it doesn't feel comfortable to use for a practice session, you may need to give it even up to a week to really settle in. And so you just gradually add more play time, you gradually expand out the range that you're trying on the bassoon, and gradually add in all these changes, and eventually it will break into what it needs to be. I find in my own playing and with my own reeds that it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks for my reeds to start feeling really good. But every reed is different, and you have to be patient and be willing to give it time to adjust. If you've spent several days following the process that I just outlined for breaking in the reed, and you still feel like it's too resistant, it's not doing what you want to do, and you're starting to get pretty frustrated with it, at that point, it may need some further adjustments. And the first adjustment I'm going to talk about with you, it has to do with the wires. All you need for this is a pair of pliers, which you may already have at home, and just about any pair of pliers, smaller pair of pliers will work, but I'll include a link down to a pair of pliers that I would recommend purchasing if you need to buy one. The nice thing about adjusting wires on bassoon reeds, and it's also why this is the very first adjustment I teach, is that anything that you do to the wires, you can undo it. So it's easy to make mistakes and go back to where you started, because you can undo it. Whereas if you're scraping cane off the reed, say with a knife or sandpaper, you can't put cane back onto the reed. But the wires, you can undo any mistakes that you did. We're going to start with the first wire, or the top wire, and this is the wire that is the closest to the blades, the part that you play on of the reed. This wire controls the tip opening and how open or closed it is. It differs from person to person, but generally the tip opening of the reed should be about 1 millimeter wide, measured right in the center of the reed. If your tip opening is wider than that, then you should try closing it. And if it's narrower than that, you can try opening it. And I'm going to show you how to do both of those adjustments right now. Before you make any wire adjustments, you want to make sure that the reed is completely soaked, or else you could risk cracking it. In order to close the tip opening, you're going to take your pliers and squeeze top to bottom directly on the first wire. Your pliers should be touching the wire and not the cane. Watch how this adjustment affects the tip opening and gauge how much pressure you're using on the pliers based on what you're seeing at the tip. Once you've closed the tip a bit, go ahead and try it out on the bassoon and see if it makes a difference. If you have the opposite issue where you think your tip opening is too closed, then you're going to take your pliers and squeeze from side to side on that first or top wire, again directly on the wire, and you're going to watch the tip opening while you squeeze, and you should see it open. Now, if you happen to go too far and make the tip opening either too open or too closed, this is again where doing adjustments to the wires is really nice, because you just do the opposite to what you just did. If you made it too open, you just squeeze top to bottom to close it up. And if you made it too closed, if the tip opening is too closed, you're gonna take your pliers and squeeze side to side. Go slowly and gently the entire time that you're doing this process, and test out the reed frequently on the bassoon to feel and see what the difference is making. If you feel like when you play the bassoon, there's sort of an airy sound at the beginning of every note, this might indicate that there's a little bit too much cane on the tip of the reed, and that you get that thuddy, airy sound, and it needs to be taken away so that you have a little bit more control at the start of notes. I recommend using 400 grit sandpaper, which you can find at your local hardware store for pretty cheap, or you can purchase online. I've included a link down below where you can find the sandpaper if you need to buy some. The first thing that you're going to try with sandpaper is actually very simple. With a small piece of sandpaper, you're going to insert it in between the blades of the reed, just like so, and you're going to pull it out. Then you're going to flip the sandpaper over so that the coarse side is touching the inside of the other blade, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You're only going to do this process once or twice, because if you do it too much, you could take off too much cane on the inside, and since we can't see what's going on inside the blades as easily, we don't want to risk taking out too much cane. Before you do anything else with the reed, test it out on the bassoon and see if this adjustment made any difference at all. If it didn't, then keep watching, and I have some more sandpaper tricks for you. With a small sheet of sandpaper on a flat surface, you're going to take your reed and put it at maybe a 30-degree angle to the sandpaper, so that only the very tip of the reed is touching the sandpaper, and you're going to pull it back against the sandpaper, and that's going to pull a little bit of cane off the very tip of the reed, which also helps to take away some of the resistance. Once you've done it on one side, flip your reed around and do it on the other side so that the blades of your reed stay balanced. You don't want to take off a lot of cane on one blade and then not on the other, because putting those blades out of balance with each other is not going to be good for your playing. After doing this once or twice, take the reed and test it on your bassoon and see if it's made any difference. You can always go back and do this process a few more times. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 more strokes on the sandpaper on each side, and see if it makes a difference. So if you've tried everything I've shown you today, you've broken in the reed, you've tried all these adjustments that I've mentioned, and you've ruled out the possibility that your instrument might need to be serviced, it might just be that the way that particular reed is made is not working for you. And the nice thing about purchasing reeds directly from a professional bassoonist is that oftentimes you can reach out to that bassoonist and ask them to make adjustments. So for example, if you purchase reeds from me, you can reach out directly to me and say, hey Natalie, I'm really having trouble with my low register in my reeds. And so I hear that, and I will make an adjustment on your reeds and send them out with those adjustments. Or if you are always sharp on your reeds, or it's just too resistant, or sometimes not resistant enough, there are changes that I can easily make, and any reed maker can easily make in the reeds to make them easier to play for you. So I always recommend, if you're consistently having trouble with reeds, reach out to the person who's making them, and they can probably help you or give you some advice to make them work better for you. Now, if you're having difficulty with just about every reed you play and you know your instrument is working and no matter what you do, you're just struggling, if you're not actively working with a private teacher, it's difficult to tell whether it's the reed, whether it's the instrument, maybe it's something in the way that you're playing that's not helping. So I strongly recommend that if possible, that you try to get into lessons. It can be really helpful and eye-opening to have a teacher listen to you and watch you and offer suggestions and tiny things to change in your playing that could help you out. Getting one lesson is better than nothing, but if you can work with a teacher on a regular basis, whether it's once a week, once every other week, or once a month or something like that, that's going to get you a lot further along, and you're going to figure out these issues that you're having a lot quicker if you have somebody who's actively working with you. Even if there's not a bassoon teacher in your area that you can access, a lot of teachers are teaching online now, including myself. So I strongly recommend if you're struggling with reeds or you're dealing with other issues, that you sign up for a lesson with myself or another teacher and get the help that you need. If this video was helpful for you, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and comment down below what sort of issues are you having with your reeds. I know that you're having some issues and maybe some questions about things that I didn't necessarily cover in this video today, and I can always answer your questions if you ask something specific in the comments. I do my best to try and answer all the questions that I come across.